In 2000, 1 out of 150 children were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, while in 2022, 1 in 31 children was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. While there's a lot of reasons for why that might be, one of the big questions that parents have been having is, how do we take care of these children? While there's plenty of different institutions and organizations trying to solve that problem, maybe none of them have been doing it better than Polaris Academy, a new school located in Mesa, Arizona, with revolutionary ways of taking care of children and supporting them in ways that are really unique and really innovative. Today, I'm interviewing Nathan Palmer, the CEO and co-founder, to talk about what those things are and how he created it. Cool. Nathan?
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm great, and thanks for the intro. I mean, I feel like I'm a little more accomplished than what I feel I am sometimes by the introduction, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with a brief overview of what Polaris is, just so that we kind of have a framework, and then let's go into, after that, we'll talk about kind of how that was created.
Yeah, sure. What is it? It changes every little bit, but it operates on a philosophy. What it is it's an attempt, really by me as a parent of a child on the autism spectrum, to deliver more services in one place, in one collaborative environment. There are so many options out there and so many approaches, as you were mentioning in your introduction, to how do we address this thing called autism. And Polaris Academy was our effort to say, instead of doing this here and doing that over there, how much can we do all together in one spot, and what would that look like? And so it's blending supportive therapies with a traditional academic experience in a way that's more inclusive than I'd ever seen. So that was kind of the goal. It's what we are, and it's this really incubator of what can you do when you blend things in a way that's not a medical environment but still has these clinically trained staff in a teaching system. And it's been fun. It's been hugely rewarding.
Cool. So one of the tricky things about autism spectrum disorder is the spectrum component, right? Is you have lower and higher functioning. You have kids who struggle more with communication, verbalization, others with sensory response.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons why, maybe not necessarily to the best interest of the kid's development, a lot of times they have been pulled out into one-on-one interactions with strictly adults, right?
Yeah.
How do you manage that component of just how wide of a spectrum there is and how different kids can need so many different things?
It has been, so that question, Garrett, is more loaded, I think, than you realize. It has been a journey of discovery. How do you do that, right? I think that's the question we're continually trying to answer. Mm-hmm. And maybe let me touch on something you kind of hit on. Typical therapy is one-to-one, right? It's an adult and a child. And there's lots of reasons for that. Some of it is, from a clinical perspective, it's more intensive, right? Mm-hmm. So they get to focus just their attention because every kid is unique, and especially in the spectrum, right. You know, the saying is you've met one kid on the spectrum and you've met one kid on the spectrum. Yeah. But there's other reasons. There's regulatory reasons, which is there's HIPAA concerns and medical disclosure and protecting client confidentiality. There's other regulatory concerns of billing, like how do I track services from one kid versus another? And so the clinical approach is, well, if I have one adult, one child, all those things are easy to answer. Confidentiality is built in. But it's counterintuitive because the biggest thing we're trying to do for these kids, right, help them to integrate into society, to develop their social developmental skills, their emotional regulation components. We accomplish that by sticking them in a confined room with an adult, right? And so the more and more I meet parents, and autism can be a lonely world. Like you talk to parents out there, yes, there's services everywhere for the kids, but the way they're run, it's like you still feel isolated as an adult. You're on your own floating island. And so, you know, I meet more and more parents now with this school and hearing their stories, and this common component is, yeah, my son was at school or my daughter's at school, and the principal's their best friend, or the teacher's their best friend, or the coach is their best friend, but they have no friends. Or they go to the park and they relate with the adults versus the kids. And so we're, I think, unintentionally programming this secure relationship that we don't want to be what they actually grow into. We want them to socialize. So that solving that problem, right? How do we do that? The whole idea of Polaris was, look, rather than running these as medical programs And rather than running this, we're billing insurance, and now we're subject to all these other medical regulation criteria. The big question, the what if is, well, what if you hire all these people as school employees? Mm-hmm. What if you're not running a clinic? What if it really is just an academic institution? So in addition to your normal teachers and aides, you have these medically trained, clinically proficient professionals as really just overqualified classroom aides, right? Mm-hmm. Then what can you do? And the answer is, well, whatever you want. You know, if you read some of these like insurance manuals, I'll use ABA as an example, right? It's one of the most common, data-driven, substantiated therapies for social and behavioral development for kids on the spectrum. Well, if you read the insurance binders on the exclusions, what can you not use ABA for? There's a whole page on you can do these things, you can't do these. And Garrett, the exclusion page reads like the scope of work that I ask our clinicians to do at Polaris. Right. In an insurance setting, you can't work on academic goals. You can't work on vocational programming. You can't work on behaviors within a athletic or a school setting. I mean, there's all these things that are just you're limited by. And when we took the insurance component away, the question was, well, now what can we do? So to answer your question, what does that look like? We're answering that every day. How can we merge it in? And we realize we're creating this new form of therapy that you actually can't get in a clinic.
I really want to touch on your school store. And I'm probably jumping the gun a little bit. I know there's a lot of other things we can discuss.
We can bounce as much as you want.
Sweet. So when I went, you had a school store, 3D printers running, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then you talked about, that's all the kids. So I would love for you to break down how that came about, what it is. Please tell me the story again.
Yeah. So the school store specifically is a funny story. I'm not an academically trained professional. Like my background is not in education. It's not in therapy. So it's funny because, I have this school for autistic kids and we're doing these things and people ask, where was your training? And I was like, well, I was a contract attorney and a real estate broker. I mean, that's who I was, but I was a dad. And I think like so many parents out there, I just had these wish list things that I wish I had this for my son, or I wish I had this experience. And one of the things we wanted to develop in education was applied learning, right? Not just you go to school and you learn abstract concepts and do worksheets, but you can actually see how those things translate into functional living. And we had already conceptualized like a STEM center and a culinary center to give like, this is what school looks like at home, and this is what school looks like in community. And there was this odd alcove in our front admin space that I had planned to be like a storage closet. Mm-hmm. And I started doing tours for our school, Garrett, and I can admit this today, and I just bless all the parents that gave us the faith and trust they did in the stage we were. But we were touring the school while we were under construction. Mm-hmm. Like literally it was an empty shell, and I'm telling parents, there's going to be a wall here, and this is going to be a classroom. And we're explaining this vision of the model, but in a space that I would never have trusted my kid in, and yet these parents are walking through. And one day I'm looking at this little alcove, and I just had this vision of a storefront. I'm like, oh, and this is going to be a store. And it just was born out of a tour. And it was this fluke thought that hit me. And the more I thought on it, the more it grew. And so we use the Polaris stores as a learning center. And I would say it's in its infancy. The idea was any teacher, any class, whether it's a kindergartner or a 10th grader, can be working on math or science or any functional skill. And then the teacher can go, well, let me show you what that looks like in business. This is what addition looks like in a store. This is what multiplication, and it's in fun ways, right? We can do inventory management. We can teach them data and spreadsheets, which is functional. But we can also teach them design and innovation. What do we want to sell in the store? And how do you come up with those ideas? How do you market it? Mm-hmm. How do you analyze back-end margins and do analysis? So that's teaching them critical thinking and study and executive function with applied math and ELA. I mean, it's everything school is built for, but in an environment that they get to explore.
I want to jump back now into how all of this happened. You said that you started out in real estate, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you get, and I feel like when I talked to you about this last time, you're so casual about it. But to me, it was really mind-boggling. How do you get from real estate to starting this like revolutionary school for kids with ASD that's doing all these amazing things, especially in so short of a time span?
Yeah. Well, like I think the only reason it's revolutionary is because I wasn't classically trained in education, and so I was able to approach why do we do things this way, and come up with maybe some non-conventional approaches to it. But the how, look, whether you believe in divine intervention or providence or whatever you want to call it, Garrett, I kind of felt like I was just led down the path is the best way I can describe it. It all started with me getting frustrated with options for my son and despair. The whole backstory, we had tried public education, we tried homeschool, we looked at private school options, and there were just frustrations through all of it. And that's not to speak bad about anyone. I love public school. I love the experience my son got, but there was things he needed that just couldn't be offered there. I loved aspects of homeschooling, but I'm a dad. I'm not a teacher. My wife, bless her, like with 4 boys, like just,
Oh, wow.
we couldn't, and it's hard wearing so many hats. Like you just want to be your kid's parent. You don't want to be their provider, and mixing those roles, it just makes a lot of stress in the home environment. And the private options, a lot of them out there, he either didn't identify with, or they were full, or they were kind of very exclusive on who they would and wouldn't allow. And I just got frustrated. And I can remember the day I'm standing in a parking lot with my wife at another school that had denied my son enrollment, and I'm like, that's it. I'm just going to start my own. And it was just purely out of frustration. Right. But that seed got planted, and I started thinking, well, if I did, what would that look like? So I called a close friend of mine. He's a mentor friend, very successful businessman. I had done some projects with him in the past, and I just wanted to get his input. It's like, hey, I had this crazy idea. I'm not sure I even know what I'm doing, but it was this idea of blending, right? Just simplifying and cohesively combining these resources in a way that I just couldn't find. And like 5 minutes into the call, he stops me. He says, "I'm in. What do you need?" And I was like, I wasn't soliciting, but I mean, he's like, "No, I'm in. We're doing this." And he wasn't in education. So we went to lunch a couple of days later, had this grand plan that we were going to build our company name, get some branding so that we looked somewhat legitimate other than just me and him that had this weird idea. And I was going to meet with a principal that I heavily respected. He was a principal for my other kids. I knew how state retirement worked for principals in public education. I had no goal of hiring him. I just thought maybe I could catch him in the summer months sometime and he could consult for me. It's a few days after that, I'm dropping my kids off at school, and he's out doing crossing guard duty, and it's raining, and I'm in my gym clothes and Mickey Mouse sweatshirt, and I get this prompting to go talk to him. And I didn't have a name, I didn't have a location, and I was like, no, I'm not ready, sticking with summer plan, but it wouldn't go away. So I ended up just talking to him. And when I mentioned I was thinking about starting a school, he stops me and says, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Great, I'll run it for you." And totally caught me off guard. And he explained to me he was actually in his contract window, which for educators happens in the spring, not the summer. I didn't realize that. He's like, "Had you waited till summer, I would have said no, because I already would have been under contract for my next thing. But I'm up for retirement next year, and I've been deciding, what do I do next?" And it's just, Garrett, so many things just fell in my path. And the only reason it happened as quickly as it did is that every piece I needed to make something like this work literally presented it to me within the first couple of weeks, even down to my business partner, Brad Broyles, who's like our CFO and business backing him. He came from commercial real estate and was a VP for commercial banking. He had more accounting and finance background than I could ever wish for. And I'd never run business systems. I never modeled out business portfolio programs. And he had no experience in autism. And I told him what I was thinking of doing. He's like, "Nathan, I'm in. Like, let's do this." I'm like, "Brad, but you don't know anything about autism." He's like, "I don't care. I can learn." And so, and I'm looking around like, I know nothing about it. My principal was not a specialized autism principal. My finance partner wasn't, but that was okay because we were doing something that no one had tried. And it brought these dynamics from an education perspective, from a finance perspective, from a business creation perspective. And then we networked into people that believed in this vision and were excited about what we could create if we blended. And our staff, I didn't run a single one ad for our staff the first year. They all came organically.
Wow.
So how did it happen so fast? I don't know. It just did. Mm-hmm. And, I talk about this a lot with my business partners. I in real estate, I'm used to pushing a project along and like, it's a grind. I've got to push stuff across the finish line. This one, I feel like I'm being pulled and I'm just trying to run to keep up.
Wow.
So that's a long and again, abstract way to answer your question, but it happened just because I think it was supposed to.
Walk me through your classroom setup. Sorry,
Sure.
It's a long-winded question.
No, that's you. I think I'm more long-winded than you. So Garrett, you take all the time you need. Cool. Classroom's still a work in progress, but the general idea was we wanted it to be an engaging workspace, right? Mm-hmm. The traditional model of I sit in my class, the teacher teaches, I learn and I listen. That doesn't work for this population, especially when you factor ADHD and the other word salad of acronyms that comes with autism spectrum disorder. So, we don't have a traditional whiteboard setup. Mm-hmm. Most classrooms, like the front of the room is clearly distinguished by like 3 or 4 running panels of whiteboards. And then sometimes they'll have some electronic screen inclusion in that. Our whiteboards are more for data, so they can see visual schedules, some structured things. They're not for this, the teacher writes and you listen and take notes. We have a digital whiteboard, so it's a TV type setup. It's not just for movies. It literally creates an interactive environment. And a lot of kids on the spectrum respond very well to technology. So it creates a way that when we need focused attention, it draws their attention because we can do a lot of creative, engaging activities with, Google for Education and some other tools. But their desks are the whiteboard. So instead of watching the teacher write and they listen, the teacher teaches and the functional whiteboard is their workstation. Now that gives a lot of creative play because you can have a lot of fun engagement with your desk. It has not translated into writing on furniture at home, so that's been a good thing. Yeah. For our younger kids, it introduces elements of like occupational therapy and different grip pattern for fine motor skills and for initial writing and letter dynamics. As they get older, we use it for prototyping and modeling and coming up with creative ideas and blueprints. And I mean, it's just a space that I think is a lot more mentally rewarding than just paper pencil. The classroom itself has adaptive lighting. So a lot of schools that I had toured had like pillow sheets and tinfoil over these fluorescent lights. And it just feels ghetto. Like it just screams, okay, we get you're different and our fix is a cheap pillowcase, No, we can put in the right kind of lighting. And it's not fluorescence, it's a specialized LED. The color of light we picked was intentional for focused learning. The spacing of our lights to avoid shadowing or spotlighting effect, like everything about it was designed to just make it feel comfortable and adaptable and adjustable. Our desk structure, if you remember, some of the classrooms, they were in group settings. Some of them it was more forward facing and some of it they were paired. So that blend of academics with our therapy behavior approach, we're playing with desk structures to teach them skills while they're doing their academics. And so that team, our class sizes are right around 15 kids, but I got 3 adults in the class. I got the teacher and then 2 of our licensed behavior technicians. So they're working as a collective team. So we have a good group ratio. We have the ability to be more individualized and support our kids in the way that they really need.
I want to get into exercise. So kids with ASD tend to be less likely to engage in physical exercise, especially in the cases of like sports, right? Because sports is highly sensory. It can be volatile, right? Especially if you're playing with other kids who don't have ASD, right? Kids can shove, push, scream. It can be a really, maybe for lack of a better word, just hostile environment.
Sure.
And that can lead to kids with ASD not exercising, not engaging in group play. And those things are incredibly important, not just for social development, but for physical health and development. Mm-hmm. What are you doing in that field? What's gym class look like?
It's not like any gym you've seen at other schools. So, my son was the quintessential, it's PE time, it's in a large basketball room. And so all the kids are doing their thing and he's on the sideline by the coach, right? Because that's a safe space. I wanted to create a spot that to use a word you touched on, play, taught them how to play. So much about physical movement and development happens with kids when they play. And for neurotypical kids, that's just part of the growing up experience. For whatever reason, developmentally, kids on the spectrum, and a lot of that's social, sometimes it's anxiety driven, sometimes it's just exclusion because kids feel that they're different. They don't get some of those just standard play-based experiences. And so it creates, beyond just developmental milestones, it creates social anxiety that's not born out of anything chemical. It's just, I feel anxious because I don't know if I can do those things. I don't have confidence in movement. So we wanted to build, our gym is called the Intentional Play Gym, and it's designed to teach kids not just how to play, but to equip them with the skills to creatively play. So, we call it a tumble track trampoline. It's like a gymnast trampoline. We teach them principles of basic gymnastics, how to tumble, how to roll, how to jump, how to twist, how to flip, right? And then breaking those skills down into their fine motor skill sections to progressively get them to doing these physical movements. For some of the kids, they're hesitant because they've never done them before. For others, there's root reflexes they never moved through, like that inner ear sensation of being upside down. It's triggering, right? It creates anxiety just because it's a sensation response. Well, getting used to that and realizing it's okay and giving repetition and, repeated exposure, they move through some of these physiological anxieties in ways that now they start to have fun with it. And that dopamine hits, so they're getting now a different chemical response that's rewarding. And, this gym, I'll tell you, Garrett, we have, besides the trampoline, a rock wall, and we have a corner we call the Ninja Training Corner, which teaches them different grappling skills and has different obstacles we can attach, detach, move around. And then we have a giant interactive digital display wall that's touch responsive and motion sensitive, right? So we have things that at first glance you go, this is like a jump park on steroids. And you go, this is going to be overstimulating for these kids. It's the craziest thing. When they get in there, it's like the anxieties melt away because their population are their peers. Right. And they don't feel this hesitation because they see other kids with similar limitations. And Garrett, within the first 2 weeks, these kids that were socially withdrawn, these kids that didn't engage with their peers at parks, these kids played, and they played hard. Like it was, on one sense, it was a bit of a troublemaker because it was a super preferred environment. And so getting them to transition to and out of that was a little bit difficult.
That's a great problem to have.
It is, but man, I'll tell you what, some of the kids that you would wear headphones around the school, they'd take them off in there, even though it was louder, even though the lights were more aggressive. And this aha light bulb just went off. Like, it's not that these kids don't want to play. It's that they really didn't know how, or they didn't feel comfortable in their environment. And so it creates this space that they are rewarded for play engagement. And by the end of the year, my son was playing basketball at the playground with his brothers, and he'd never done that before. And he just had this confidence about his movement he didn't have before. So it's been fun. I have some of our students that hold their birthday parties at the school in that room. So, it's been great. And it's a testament to, we in our heart say, this is a population that doesn't know how to play and socialize. Right. I will tell you, Garrett, by changing this model where we're putting them in groups rather than isolating them, they're hypersocial. They just needed a spot to connect. And as soon as they had that connection, that safe connection, they're like every other kid. They want to play. They want to be involved. They want to grow. And it's been so fun watching them do it.
That's so cool. It reminds me of sort of engagement theory when it comes to learning new things. Chess is a great example of this. So if you want to teach somebody how to play chess, right, you play 10 games with them. If they win 5, lose 5, right? Or if they even win 4, lose 6, they'll come back excited because they want to figure out how to win.
Yeah.
If you play chess with someone and they win 0, lose 10, they're never playing chess again. And that applies in non-direct win or lose scenarios as well, right? It's like if you take a kid and you put him in an environment where he at least feels like, I'm just nothing but losing. He's going to be like, I don't want to be in that environment. What's the point?
Fair.
I don't even know where to start. But if you put him in an environment where he's like, oh, like I'm doing at least decent, right? I might not be the best, but I'm doing as well as at least some of the people around me, and I'm doing well enough that I can understand that some things are working and some things are not, right? I have a basic idea of how to progress towards better. I can find better. That's exciting. That's engaging. And it seems like that's exactly what you've created in your gym class, basically.
Yeah, I hope so. Really, I mean, cool. that was the idea. And
right.
Thank you for putting professional theory to what to us was just a good idea.
Mm-hmm. What's moving forward looking like? How is your transition from year 1 to year 2? And what's the plan as you look at, oh my gosh, we have to go through year 3, 4, 7, 8, and 12, right?
Yeah. What's the plan? Oh my gosh. I hesitate to say we have a plan because it just gets thrown out the window every other week. Mm-hmm. So our problem is we have, I wasn't sure. First off, when I started, I wasn't sure how many other parents had my story. There are educational options out there, and so I didn't know. Am I a one-off? Are there really enough of these kids that they could kind of go to public school, but they're falling through the cracks, but they don't quite fit in private? They're like this in-between displaced group, and what I'm learning is that's a huge percentage of this population. And so as the story's gotten out about what we're doing and how we're approaching it, I mean, we're just meeting so many families more than I have space to accommodate. And so right now, our year 2 plan was hone the system in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, year 1 was creation year. I mean, it was, mm-hmm. Garrett, we didn't even invent our report card until a few days before we had our first parent-teacher conferences. And we were building systems nonstop. But we've got enough in place that fortunately this year, we're up for formal accreditation. Mm-hmm. I needed that because my son's in 9th grade, and I wanted to be able to have transcripts and get him college ready, to be able to give him a state recognized diploma. So, that credentialing is retroactive as of this year. So we'll be a fully accredited, both academic and STEM institution this year. Wow. And so that allows us to now do the next phase, which is I want to develop our junior high school. We've got the location already identified. Mm-hmm. So fall of 26, we have 2 new campuses that we're going to be opening. Right now we're in 10,000 square feet and we are bursting at the seams. Mm-hmm. Each of the new campuses next year independently is like 25,000 square feet plus. So I'm going from 10,000 square feet to 60,000 square feet next year. And that's a huge relief because I want to be able to service as many kids as I can. So that's the 2-year plan. After that, I'm sure those are going to fill up. So it's just looking sustainably. How can we both grow, but still deliver on our promise and not sacrifice quality for quantity? So we're just being conscious. And there was a point, Garrett, where we kind of realized, I'm never going to be able to service even a significant fraction of this population. And so I've had other schools that we've actually toured through our site, and it's odd in business to take your, quote unquote competition mm-hmm. and open your playbook and say, hey, this is what we're doing. But that's exactly what I'm doing in this field. Like I don't see them as competition. I see them as collaborators. I want them to upgrade what they're doing. I want them to see what I'm doing, because even if this proves what I think it will be the right way to approach blended education and support, I can never grow fast enough to influence enough of the kids, even in just our local area. So I need everybody else to come. I want them to see what we're doing. I want them to incorporate as much as possible, because we can't do it without them. So what started as I want a school for my son has turned into I want to raise the bar and change how all of us go about autism education.
Wow. Nathan, you're great at this. There's nothing I could possibly say that wouldn't pale in comparison to that. That's a great way to end the podcast. So with that, I would just like to thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
You've been an absolute pleasure to have, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a really good time learning about Polaris Academy today. If you want to learn more about what they're doing, please feel free to follow the links that are in the description. Thanks.